All right, so now here in Genesis 14, in the first half of the chapter, Abram defeated these four armies from the north, from the land of Mesopotamia, that were commanded by a king named Chedorlaomer, that's referenced here in verse 17. And if you were here, you know that Abram defeated these four armies with just 318 men that weren't really soldiers. They were his servants that he had trained to fight. And with just 318 men, he defeated the armies of four kingdoms. And the victory was simply a miracle of God. God just delivered those kingdoms into the hands of Abram. There's no other explanation for it. So now he has this great victory. The battle is over. Abram is on his way back home. Hundreds of miles he's got to travel. On his way back home to Hebron, or Hebron, as we would say around here. He's got this victory. And while he is on his way home, Abram faces a temptation. After the battle, after the victory, he faces a temptation. We have an enemy. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, we're warned to be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Our enemy, the devil, is watching and looking for an opportune time to attack us. And frequently, the enemy attacks us immediately after a victory. Immediately after a success. Immediately after a win in our lives. At a time when we wouldn't expect an attack. At a time when we would think we can let our guard down and we can relax because the battle's over. We won the war. We've got the victory. We've been successful. Now it's time to celebrate and rejoice. And it's at that time often that the enemy shows up to tempt us. You know, in the book of Joshua, after God delivered the city of Jericho into the hands of Israel, remember the story of Jericho and God, it was another miraculous victory that God provided for His people, where they just marched around the walls of the city and they lifted their voices and shouted, and the walls of the city came tumbling down, and God gave Israel their very first victory in the promised land. And right after the victory, there was a guy named Achan. And Achan was tempted to take some of the spoils from the city of Jericho for himself. And he did, and he hid them in his tent. And it cost Israel greatly. The very next city they came to, Ai, they were defeated. And so after this amazing victory at Jericho, where God just showed up big time and gave them this victory, Israel experienced a humiliating defeat right after it. Why? Because after the victory, Achan was tempted and he failed. He fell for the temptation. And again, quite often, we've got an enemy, the devil, and quite often he will come to tempt us right after the success, right after the mountaintop, right after the victory. When maybe we're caught up a little bit in, rejoicing in what just happened, what we just came through, and how good God is, and how He delivered. And we let our guard down a little bit, and the enemy sees an opening. He sees an opening there. That's why Peter tells us to always be sober, always be vigilant, always stay alert. Don't let your guard down, ever. Because our enemy will seize the opportunity to put a temptation in front of us. And that temptation, if we fall for it, it undermines the victory. It undermines the victory. Just like that. The victory just kind of evaporates because of the failure. Andrew Bonner, in his commentary on Genesis, said, "Let us be as watchful after the victory as before the battle." And that's good advice. We need to be just as watchful and vigilant after the victory as we were before the battle began. Because before the battle begins, we're geared up, our mindset is in, there's a battle. We know there's a battle coming. But after the victory, the enemy might come. After the success or the big win, whatever it may be, the enemy will come with a temptation. So again, verse 17, it says, "And the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh," that is the king's valley, "after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him." Now, a couple of things we want to say about verse 17 here. First of all, so the king of Sodom comes to meet Abraham, or Abram, as he's returning back from the battle. If you look back in verse 10, we're told that during the battle against Chedorlaomer, in which Sodom and Gomorrah were defeated and captured, it says the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. It doesn't say the armies of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. The kings fled. In other words, in the heat of battle, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah abandoned their armies on the battlefield to save their own necks. And they fled and allowed their armies to be defeated and taken captive. And that just shows the kind of men these kings really were. And so now the battle is over, the victory is won, and who shows up? The king of Sodom. And the king of Sodom goes to meet Abraham to make Abraham an offer, to make a deal with Abraham. He's like Monty Hall, let's make a deal. And again, this is what our enemy does. He'll show up and try to make a deal with us. Try to negotiate to get us to compromise. And we're told, the other thing here that's important, remember geography is always important in the Bible. It's never random. There's a reason why God tells us locations of events. And here in verse 17, we're told the king of Sodom met Abraham in the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's valley. Now, the valley of Shaveh, where's that? It's in modern-day Jerusalem. It was not called Jerusalem in Abraham's day. It was called Salem in Abraham's day, as we're going to see. But the valley of Shaveh, it's in modern-day Jerusalem, and it is where the Kidron Valley, which runs between the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount, it's where the Kidron Valley comes down to the southern part of the city and where it intersects with the Hinnom Valley. So where those two valleys meet, just south of the old city of Jerusalem and south of the city of David. For those of you that have gone with us, remember when you go through the city of David and you come out of the pool of Siloam, that's the southern tip of the city of David, and just below that is this valley where the Hinnom Valley and the Kidron Valley meet, and it's there. That's the valley of Shaveh, or the King's Valley. Now I have a picture for you that I want to show you. So this is what it probably would have looked like in Abraham's day.